Hello, I'm Lynn Turner Fitzgerald with the Cold Cases of Yellowstone County. Over the next several months, we'll examine a number of unsolved homicides dating back to 1973. Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder says the cold case unit was established because of a dedicated group of volunteers.
Well, actually it came about, I had a former federal agent contact me several years ago about he was going to retire, and he was talking about possibly getting involved in investigating unsolved crimes in Yellowstone County. And he couldn't get anybody to really bite on it in the area, so he never really brought it up again. And then after I got elected, that was kind of one of the first things that I remembered, that we have a lot of unsolved crimes, maybe not a lot in numbers, but too many in the way of homicides. So, and Monty Wallace, you know, he's one of our reserve deputies, and he's also instrumental in this. He and I got to talking about it, and he kind of ran with it a little bit at first. Then he came back to me and he said, "Hey, I really like this idea. Why don't we do this?" And he offered up his time. He has been volunteering numerous hours and more or less coordinating everything. And we've been talking, and finally it came down to, he came to me, these are the crimes that we need to be looking at. These are the homicides. So it just kind of took off from there. So we started putting the information together, looking for volunteers, looking for people that really want to be a part of this investigation, those that were actually involved in the investigations. And I even got a letter from a former lieutenant that worked here and then retired from here all the way from Austria. And he said, "I heard about this." He reads the Gazette online, and he said, "I want to be a part of this when I come back." So he's a part of this. We've got federal prosecutors, forensic pathologist on board. We've got attorneys. We've got cops that have been cops for many, many years, and people, like I said, that were actually involved in these original investigations. And we just started putting them together, getting the cases together, reviewing them. And it just, like I said, took off from there. It's been fantastic. The movement that we have seen since this started, not even a year ago, we have these meetings, and it's tough to get people that are doing their own thing, you know, have their own other jobs and all this together into a room, 10, 12, 14 people in there, and talk about these cases. And as soon as somebody starts talking about one, you get somebody on the other side of the table going, "Yeah, but what about this?" Or "This is what I heard." Well, that kind of falls into play with what we're doing over here. And by the end of the meeting, you can't get them out of there. So it's been fantastic. Like I said, the movement that we have seen I firmly believe that we're going to be solving some of these cases.
We'll begin this series with the murder of Judith Hatton. On the evening of March 11, 1995, Judy was at home in her quiet Laurel neighborhood, babysitting her 3-year-old granddaughter. Judy had a telephone conversation with her mother at around 8:30 that evening. Investigators believe that was the last known conversation of Judy Hatton's life.
Yep.
March 11, 1995, what happened?
Well, Judy lived in Laurel, and her boyfriend came home and found her in the hallway of her house. She had been basically beaten to death. As far as we know, there was no indication of any forced entry into the house, but information that has been gleaned in the investigation, she probably didn't lock her house. You know, she may have, she may not have, but there's no evidence that there was forced entry. She was severely beaten, which leads us to believe that this might have been up close and personal. You know,
Would you call it savage?
Yes, yes. With some type of instrument, probably, some kind of an object. We haven't really recovered what we would consider the murder weapon or anything yet, but we believe that there are people out there that probably have information that can help in this case. One of the interesting things is Judy was babysitting her granddaughter at the time, and she was within feet, you know, just a very few feet of where this incident occurred, and the granddaughter was only 3 years old. There was no harm to the granddaughter, maybe no reason to harm the granddaughter in the suspect's eyes. I don't believe that we had any evidence of any other crime that committed there or had been committed. So
No robbery, no.
I'm not aware of anything that we had been determined had been stolen or anything, other than her pickup. Her black S10 pickup was found, I believe, about 2 to 3 blocks down the street from where she lived.
Wrecked? Was it okay?
Nope, it was just parked on the side of the road. We believe people probably saw, or somebody may have seen somebody in that vehicle. Whether or not they are able to identify them by name or anything, somebody might remember this, that they saw this about that same time, and would be able to give us some sort of description, or if they did know who this person is, let us know who drove that vehicle away from the house.
You believe that the vehicle missing is related to her homicide, or do you think it's just random?
I think we have reason to believe that it was taken about the same time.
Mother and daughter Cheryl Marshall and Pam Cullen were acquainted with Judy Hatten and her 2 sons. Cheryl worked as a dispatcher for the Laurel Police. What was the mood like in the office?
Pretty much the shock. And because Judy was a very nice lady. And it just boggles my mind.
Well, and I'm wondering too, like for a town the size of Laurel, to have a seemingly random murder is so rare.
Yes. I don't know, I just don't understand how come they've never found out anything, or it's just so sad.
Yeah. But now you worked with guys who probably went to the scene and tended to the crime scene. Did you have any conversations with them?
No, actually my theory when I was working, I hear nothing, I know nothing, I see nothing.
I imagine a lot of dispatchers take that attitude, though.
Yeah. That's just, I don't know. I was raised in law enforcement. I come from a family of law enforcement, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband, I never ever said anything even to him. It was like, what happens at work stays at work.
Sure.
And I had the pleasure, I was the director of the Laurel Ambulance also, and Judy worked with me for a very brief time.
Oh, she did?
Yes, and it was too much for her. She said she just had so many things going on, and I understood, and she was just such a nice, sweet, caring person.
Did she hang out with nice, sweet, caring people?
To the best of my knowledge. I think pretty much she was kind of like a loner, really.
But that evening she did have a granddaughter with her.
Yes, that's what I understand.
So she was a grandma?
Oh, yes, very definitely a grandma. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, Pam, you were actually acquainted not only with Judy, but her 2 sons.
Yeah, we went to school together.
Oh, okay, all right. What was
Yeah.
your reaction?
Oh, I was in shock. I remember hearing about it on the news because one of her granddaughters and my son were the same age. They were both 6 months old, around 6 months, and just watching in disbelief that something like that would happen to Judy.
What was she like?
She was just really quiet and nice. I mean, just not a mean bone in her body, So it was really hard to understand how somebody could hurt a person like that. She came in at the time I was going to nail school in Billings, and she had just come in and got her nails done by me, and we talked, and I mean, just really quiet, soft-spoken, and her boys were the same way, just kind of quiet, and so I don't know. I was just thinking, I think about her a lot. I mean, it's just really hard for me to understand how somebody that, with such a good heart, that could happen to her.
And, we went out to the neighborhood and we looked around, and it's so quiet. It is so very, very quiet in that neighborhood. The only thing we heard were dogs, and not very many of them. So it's a real puzzle. Why, Judy?
Yes, it is.
Was she a good mom?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, she raised two great boys,
So you're doing her nails, and I know the relationship that develops. There you talk. It's girl talk. Was there anything on her mind when you were doing her nails?
No, it was just a normal nail appointment, and she made an appointment for the to get her fill done, in 2 or 3 weeks, and but then all that stuff happened, and so no, it was just a normal appointment.
Do you remember her son's reactions? I mean, that had to have changed those boys.
They took it very hard, very, very hard. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole town did.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Laurel's such a small town. You cannot have something like that happen in that kind of town, that small town,
Right.
where everybody knows everybody. And the whole town was affected by it.
Mike Boyette is a retired sheriff's lieutenant. He is now a volunteer with the cold case unit. All right, first of all, you've done other murder investigations
Yes.
during your career.
Yes.
You have done crime scenes, you have done this kind of investigation.
Correct.
What stands out in your mind about this case?
Laurel, Montana, quiet, as you had mentioned earlier, peaceful. You usually don't see this type of homicide in a setting like that. I mean, I could see it in Chicago, but not in this rural, small town.
So are you describing a brutal murder?
Yes, yeah. I remember reading the article at home, listening to it, and I said, this is bizarre for this area, not knowing a thing.
What did you read?
A grandmother with a 3-year-old at their house being bludgeoned to death, no suspects. It was unusual in my mind. Well, her boyfriend, went to the residence to pick her up, to take her to a play or a show or something like that, and found her and then called the Laurel Police Department. And then that started the investigation. The Laurel Police Department, along with the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Department, came in and started gathering evidence, taking photographs, talking to neighbors, friends, relatives. There's a lot of paperwork that's been generated. All these cases are not easy to sit down and read in an hour. I mean, it takes days and days to read the files and then try to put it into some perspective of the time frame and how it works. So that's why it's kind of easier for me to sit back, kind of like the armchair quarterback. It's kind of easier to sit back now.
Fresh eyes on it.
Right.
With fresh eyes on it.
So I'm not even allowed to work on a homicide that I worked on in the Sheriff's Department. They make me work on a different homicide because of fresh eyes.
I see.
Very interesting. It's a good idea.
I've seen the volumes of notebooks that go into each one of these homicides, and it's shelves and shelves and
Correct.
shelves
Right. Correct.
of information. Every detail has been described. I mean, every piece of evidence.
Right. And that's why it takes more than one person to do it.
Sure.
And then what we're trying to do is, was something missed? Was something overlooked? Try to come up with what should we do next? Who should we interview? What evidence should be sent off to the crime lab?
Right.
When I first started on the Sheriff's Department and we collected evidence, we didn't have DNA. And that's a big deal today, very big deal. And I think the DNA is going to help solve several cases that we're currently working on.
Rickard Ross is a 26-year veteran of the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Department. He now volunteers 2 days per week with the cold case unit.
I was involved in a number of homicide investigations. The first one, I assisted Sheriff Jim Meeks. He was deputy sheriff then in 1968. He conducted the investigation of the homicide of Bruce Myers. And then there are several homicides that occurred in the years following, and I was involved in a number of those homicides. Unfortunately, a number of those homicides are still unresolved, so that's part of the reason that I want to be involved in this cold case unit. Yes, there are several homicides that I still have a strong interest in that I believe that can be resolved, that we can come to a solution and apprehend the offender, and that we can make peace for the relatives that survive. That's probably one of the hardest things with an investigation, is seeing the hurt that happens to the family.
When we return, we'll learn more about Judy Hatten. Mona was living in North Dakota when she got word that Judy had been killed.
It's really hard to believe. It was my aunt, I believe, that called me because my parents were gone.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was a shock of something that you never imagined could happen to you. Growing up, we were close. We were barely a year apart. And my mom used to dress us alike, and people would mistake us for twins. So.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I'll bet that was fun.
And then when our kids were young, we were real close at that time.
Yeah. Tell us who Judy was.
I guess whenever I think of Judy, I guess the best word to describe her would be busy. Busy all the time. She always had something, or she always had to have something to do, Just doing nothing was not in something she did well. She just was a hard worker and always had to be doing something, so.
Other people have described her the same way, that she had a lot going on all the time. And she was a grandmother.
Right, loved being a grandma. Grandkids were everything to her. She, like I say, she was a hard worker, but work was just something you filled your time with till you could be with kids and grandkids, I guess. Loved the grandkids. Loved going barefoot. That was one of her things. We always used to laugh at her about only wore shoes when it was absolutely necessary. I'd like to see it solved, but I just don't have that much hope at this stage of the game.
Cold case unit volunteer Mike Boyette is of a different mind.
We started Crime Stoppers many, many years ago. Solved a lot of crimes from that. People can come in and just say, I do not use my name.
Okay.
Right?
Do you believe that Judy Hatton's killer is out there?
Yes. 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 And time is now on our side.
Laurel Police Chief Rick Musson was on the original team investigating the murder of Judy Hatten. At that time, he was Assistant Chief of Police.
What stands out in your mind about this one?
Probably the severity of the physical damage that took place. You get gunshot wounds, and it'll kill somebody. You get knives to use, but a blunt object you don't see every day. So that was one of those different things you see, and you look at maybe a blunt object where it's up and personal. And so we looked at that early on. It didn't take long to figure out there was maybe something personal going on there. But what is that motive? That's what we've been scratching our heads over and looking at evidence and following up on every lead we could follow during the early days of the investigation and try to come up with a motive. So sometimes you get suspicion of a motive, like, yeah, it could be this, but there's no evidence leading you there. And we're evidence driven. So unless someone wants to come up and confess, then we can put the evidence with the confession. But when you have no confession and things seem to run dry when it comes to investigation, you work this lead and it
Yeah.
stops.
And there were several leads in this that really didn't lead anywhere.
Right. It just stopped. We couldn't get it to come back. It just
Yeah.
never came back.
Right, right. Do you think the killer is out there?
Unless that person died, I don't, because we always look at, is it a transient type of thing? Personally, I don't believe it was a transient type of murder. So it would be reasonable to think that our murderer is still out,
Yeah.
living today.
And the little girl was found unharmed, and according to some of these news accounts, the child did not witness this murder.
Again, it's hard for us to know. The location, where the child was, and the scene, it's really hard for us to know if the child was asleep. We just don't know.
Okay.
So we had no indication early because the child was so young to know any kind of, was there something traumatic that she saw? It's really hard to know.
Mm-hmm.
Solving this case and others will most likely depend on DNA evidence, a tool that was unavailable at the time Judy Hatten was killed.
Evidence was collected at the scene, and there might be, because of the new technology that we have right now, better ways to test some of this evidence. And those are being looked at. As a matter of fact, one of the things that our cold case unit is doing at this time is developing lists of evidence from all these different cases that we have of what do we prioritize, or how do we prioritize the type of evidence that we're going to send in. And DNA has been very instrumental in a lot of cases, and the new types of DNA testing, that's important. There's some stuff that our local crime